So, love to get your life story here. Can you start us off telling me how you were working? How did you begin working at the Manila Chronicle?
Yeah, well, typical Filipino arrangement. My father knew the editor, and he had worked for the publisher, who was part of the sugar block in Negros. My father was a fast-rising young businessman. So he was also a founder of JC's, Junior Chamber of Commerce, the JCs of the Philippines. So one day, after graduation, I said, Dad, I want to work in a newspaper. He says, oh, here we go. So he said, okay, I'll take you to Ernie Del Rosario. They were friends in the Escolta Walking Corporation, which was where all the dynamic young businessmen of the time, this was the 50s, we were in post-war recovery. They all became very close in the Escolta Walking Corporation. That was the Makati of his day. Ernie Del Rosario takes a look at me and says, okay, let's throw her into the water. And throw me into the water they did. Most of the time, I had to do girly things like editing, writing captions for Woman and Home. That was how the male mind works at the time. But I was always hanging out with the desk. The editors were far more interesting, lots of things to say. I would tag along to the Senate, I would tag along to the Foreign Affairs, to the senior reporters. They liked me around because they found me pretty. But I was learning. So one day, I get called to the desk and they say, okay, let's do a feature story. The Boy Scouts who had gone to a conference in America or in Europe, I forget, an international conference. Their airplane crashed. So I was sent to cover. That was my first front page story. That big crash, and the names of those Boy Scouts are now the names of where you live in Quezon City, the Scouts.
Yep.
So that was how I started. Most of the time, my regular job was writing stupid captions for fashion photos. But very soon, the boys on the desk found me very useful. So they'd send me all over the place. I interviewed Vic Morrow when he visited, Combat. Big thing for television at the time. Here in the Philippines, black and white series. I think it was already Vietnam. No, it wasn't Vietnam. It was some series of wars. America has lots of wars, as you know. And then there would be the French actress, Mylène de Mongeau. All of these famous celebrities. I was always thrown their way. My biggest one was an interview with Akira Kurosawa. I'll never forget that. The emperor himself, Tenno, they call him in Japan. That was the beginning of my lifelong worship for Kurosawa-san. Thing was, he played a trick on me. I conducted my interview in English. He had an interpreter. And then, when I escorted him to the elevator with the interpreter, he said, thank you very much. That was an interesting interview. Ha ha, what a trickster. That was Kurosawa. I had a very close look.
That was 1960.
65, 66.
I think you mentioned that they were forming a union?
That's how I got laid off because they said, you're basically a rich girl, so you don't need this job. That really hurt. I was laid off. Fortunately, the bigger newspaper, Manila Times, took me in right away. There I landed as a regular feature writer. No more silly fashion captions.
How about your Fulbright in Columbia? Is that 66?
Yeah, that was nice. I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into. But everybody, if they were not getting married, was going to graduate school, so I owed it to myself, right? So I got a Fulbright, and then I chose New York. At a time when the SDS was recruiting on campus to be for conscientious objectors. I had no idea I had walked into the biggest story of my time, the Vietnam War. And that was how I learned Marxism. From a Jewish boy, no less. The world was breaking into Columbia campus. It was really more than the world. It was a global surge. That was wonderful.
Did you meet Mark Rudd? That's the main name that I know from Columbia.
No, but I knew this reputable journalist, especially of the East Village, Paul Krasner. I don't think you're familiar with him. You look him up. He's very interesting. It was the Village Voice crowd that I gravitated to very naturally. Of course, that led to my own investigation into drugs. Marijuana and LSD, that's all. I would not try anything else. And I did research before I tried it. And I liked it. I liked it very much.
The author of The Power Elite, C. Wright Mills. Did you take any
Of
courses?
course, my boyfriend made sure that I was apprised of the existence of this creature. And also C.P. Snow, all of the extreme leftists and the extreme righties. He was doing a good job educating this little Asian girl.
So you get this new left education in the 60s, and then when are you back
Mid
in the.
60s,
Yeah.
mid 60s. I got home, I got back as soon as I saw the headlines of revolution in the Philippines. I was not going to miss this one, especially since my first cousin, Chito Santa Romana, was leading the what would later be called the Social Democratic Front. That was fun. That was when I learned all about National Democrats, Social Democrats, Liberal Democrats. Our time was real education and change. Of course, I wasn't going to neglect the part I had learned, about the drug culture. That too would be a mainstream, yeah, formative force for the world. We're still fighting over it right now, right?
But I think you mentioned that the counterculture wasn't so big in the Philippines. It was more of an American phenomena.
Yes, that's right. But of course, getting back to the Philippines, I discovered, Filipinos are very sensitive to global change. That's how we tick. We know what's going on. So I found myself right in the center of Manila, Bohemia. So I moved from my father's place to my own hippie pad in Ermita. That was fun.
Is this during the first quarter storm, just after, or just before?
Yes, it was actually coeval, same time. Because we were walking stone down Ermita streets. Suddenly, there's cameras popping and bombs exploding, glass splinter flying on the streets. There's this big demonstration. We couldn't ignore each other. Funny thing was, in the evening, the rallies and their leaders would be coming to our Bohemian hangout. Our main office, we called it Indios Bravos. That was where all the hippies were. So the hippies and the activists, those were my friends.
And then you were friends with Imelda's niece at the time, or was that later?
Yeah,
Beatrice
no,
Ram.
no. We were college friends and then
Oh.
we were together in New York.
Mm-mm.
So we were part of the whole wave. Her husband was a filmmaker. She lived in the East Village. When she came home, she said, I miss New York. Do you think we should put up a disco? Definitely. Yeah, okay. We spent half year in Manila, half year in New York. She was a little rich girl, no? Yeah, I said, I can't go back, unless I have a scholarship. Oh, we'll find a way.
And did you go back with her?
No, it's too interesting here. Besides, Marcos declared martial law. Even she, who was the niece of Imelda, couldn't leave.
So that trip never happened.
Not until 2 decades later.
You are on the margins of the UP Writers Club in the
Yes.
early 70s.
Yes.
You want to talk
You
about
couldn't
that?
help it because they were all over the streets. We just went to the same places. I couldn't help it. When they killed Ninoy, that's when I got really close. That's when one of the professors at the UP said, oh, I always thought you were a member of the Writers Club. I said, yeah, I'm the type, aren't I? Yeah, they were all my friends. They were all leftists, extreme left, many of them.
You 72, you started doing journalism again?
No. When Marcos declared martial law, I made a vow I was not going to write for any of the censored press. So I settled for poetry and travel, just going lyrical. At the same time, deepening my studies in astrology and all this. I stayed in the cultural side of things, watching them all making fools of themselves with their falsified stories in the crony press. It was really shameful.
Some of your former colleagues.
Yeah, my close friends. They said, but we can't survive. Yeah, I know, I understand. I'm not criticizing you. I just say I can't do it. I cannot. Never. It took a lot to get back to that crony press, that whole structure.
Can you describe it overall for people who aren't familiar with how the crony press worked?
It's very simple. It's the template for all other dictatorships. You just can't write anything unless it's under their guidance or their orders. That's all. That's why I stuck to culture. That way I could prick them once in a while.
Do you have an example of the prick?
It happened soon after martial law when I wrote something called Ermita in the Kali Yuga, which got very favorable reviews from the intellectuals in the palace, who are my friends, who used to be my friends. Chief among them, Kit Tatad, Marcos's information minister. Idiot. He said, Sylvia, that was very well done. I said, yeah, you couldn't write that where you are now, Kit. But it was hidden. It was obtuse. I stuck to describing the hippies and what we did and our experiments. And what we learned from the tarot, that was new to them, they were learning.
So the Malacanang was following your work actually and interested in it.
Yeah, because the writers of the Philippines are like family. Like everything else in this country, it's family. We knew each other from just all the relations, etc., and so forth. Especially Mrs. Nakpil, whom I considered my literary mother, my journalist mother. I was extremely disappointed with her joining Marcos. She had to explain to me 30 years later what happened. Only then did I forgive her and speak to her again. I could not forgive that. I sacrificed 20 years not to get involved with any of their stuff. I was just so sure that they were wrong. Turns out the country agreed.
They agreed in terms of.
Well, the first thing that happened when the left had organized itself enough to hit back at the crony press, and then they killed Ninoy the very next day. Naturally, I was given 2 columns in the Mosquito Press. And now they're following the Mosquito Press, like they're following Facebook now, to see what's the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to have a tendency to find the real thing by instinct.
Let's how about PETA? Before we get to 83, are you in the mix with the PETA people
PETA,
at the PETA? Oh.
Philippine Educational Theatre Association. Yes, I wrote them a long and beautiful story when I was in the Sunday Times magazine when they launched, when PETA was born. I was right there. I had no idea it was going to be so historic. I just liked the theater and I liked the actors and actresses, the young actors and actresses. It was a beautiful movement. It still is. It continues to grow. Too much under the influence of the left, is my opinion. But then, they've already organized so much of the protest against all this nonsense from regime to regime. It continues. So we need to have PETA. I just wish they weren't so mechanistic. They can become so mechanistic. They're beautiful when they sing because they have true talents. But I don't like this formula slogans of theirs. They were still protesting the U.S. Marcos dictator, no, the U.S. Duterte dictatorship, like they did the U.S. Marcos dictatorship, when it was already fast becoming, it's obvious to everyone, this is China Duterte. Guys, they were getting it from the senior left, they were especially on Facebook, they were really getting it, but they weren't listening. They were so organized, so disciplined, so unoriginal. So now I think they've realized already. It takes a little while to educate the young, while the older leftists are just having a merry old time on Facebook, scolding them, telling them that's wrong. It's nice because now, at this time, things are more open as far as these nuances are concerned. So mistakes are corrected more quickly. The only one we can't quite correct right now is Jose Maria Sison. He thinks he knows everything.
Can you tell us how the left and PETA became intertwined? How was the relationship developed in the first place?
It was a natural development, I believe, because in the beginning, it was really the art. Well, in the Philippines, everything goes home to relationships. I believe it was the relationship between Cecile Guidote, the founder, who later became Mrs. Senator Gerson Alvarez, and Lino Broca. Lino was an all-around theater man whom Cecile found very useful. It was Lino, actually, his personal political development that influenced many of them because he was a very charismatic man.
Cecile had to leave the country when martial law was declared.
Yeah.
Right? And that left things to Lino.
Yes, that's right. Basically, that's what happened.
Were you already friends with Lino at that point and Cecile?
Yes. I was closer to Cecile because we're both convent girls. We used to do the CEG, College Editors Guild, and the National Union of Students. Both of us, we represented our schools.
And can you remind me which school you were coming from?
First, I was in St. Scholastica, and then I had a fight with Mother Superior. So my father transferred me to St. Teresa's. He absolutely refused to let me go to UP. He said, "You're going to become a communist and an atheist." Well, I did that anyway, and more. I also turned Buddhist. And then I was into the Sufis. I just wanted to know where does all this go home to. I was always after the ultimate. In drugs as in God, the ultimate.
So how about Cecil? What happens there when she has to leave the country when martial law is declared? Are you aware of what's going on there?
Yeah, we used to visit in New York when she was there. You know, Cecile is an actress. She's basically a theater girl. I've always suspected that she was in it because she was basically a theater person. The ideology came later. But then there were personal experiences of human rights violations, especially in her husband's family, that just swept her into that position.
The opposition.
Yeah, the position of the opposition. Yeah.
Let's get back to Broca then. I was reading up on Broca a bit, and speaking of aesthetics and politics, I guess he didn't much like Stanislavski, and he didn't much care for Beckett. What were his aesthetic views like?
No, I wish you'd research that yourself, dear. I can't speak for Lino. I don't dare, even if he's dead now, because he's such an original. Oh, he's wonderful. He had such excellent instincts. And, he says, as to theory, bahala na kayo dyan. Tell me na lang. But he was really busy mesmerizing the masses, He just had a thing. He just loved it. His relationship with Mike De Leon was really funny. Because Mike has such a beautiful library. He's so learned, He just can't get Lino to sit down. He couldn't get Lino to sit down long enough to listen. Now, this is Bertolt Brecht. This is what happened here. Oh, choo, 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 choo. Mike will have to do a whole documentary with all of us for Lino to finally understand. Lino had no time for these theories. He had instinct, is what he had. Excellent instinct. Also, God's chosen. This is how I see it.
He was developing his own technique where he would act. I think he would act out for the actors.
Yeah.
And can you?
Yeah.
I'm still trying to understand how this worked. Can you explain what his technique was?
There was a lot of the missionary about Lino. That was his approach, I believe, to life and to theater as well. So he would really try to connect with you soul to soul, even if he had 100 people waiting in line. Usually he succeeded. That was how his charisma worked. It's hard for me to systematize it for your academic purpose. But I just recall all the things, all the lines he used to spin about, figure out, and all the interviews that were done with him. You better search Google because there's a lot of stuff there. Very, very good stuff. The things Lino said, how he behaved on the set, what it was like spending a whole day, spending a whole week, spending the shooting, You will there, you can put it all together. I don't dare speak for an original like Lino. I can only guess. But we got along like a house on fire.
Can you talk more about Mike De Leon and Lino Broca and yourself? Or
the most fun I had was when we were doing Free the Artist, Free the Media, because there was room for everyone. Everyone's talent fit with everyone else's. That's one of the things I loved about this whole opposition movement of the journalists and the film artists and the actors and the actresses and the singers, and it was so much fun. And I think from that passion, we sat back and now began to theorize. And that too was fun because we were learning so much. I was pretty sure we were making history. And we were. Hey. We got rid of Marcos, didn't we? Eventually, 3 years later. That beautiful rally of ours in Liwasan Bonifacio on Valentine's Day in 1982 is well nigh unforgettable. The left always says they started the whole protesting against Marcos still in the 70s in La Tondena. Yes, that's true. Because those were very, very disciplined religious forces. Those were nuns and priests, and they had really thought it out in the light of theology. We were thinking it out in the light of experience, and all the creatives converged. In 1982, Valentine's Day, unforgettable, beautiful. That's what led to all the rallies henceforth. That's my personal view of it.
Can you take us then from, in a little bit more detail, from how Free the Artist started up to, I guess, Valentine's Day led to this Concerned Artists of the Philippines, right?
Yeah, that's when the left got in and tried to organize everyone. So I skipped out. I was there once in a while just to protest. And then I got bored. They called me unorganizable. Artists are unorganizable per se. Oh, are you artists or not? That was my challenge. Are you artists or not?
How did you get back into journalism?
That's another interesting story. By 1980, Marcos was ready to pretend that he was lifting martial law. So he pretended. That was, I believe, January 1980 or January 1981, the official lifting of martial law. I didn't believe a word of it. Because his crony press was functioning, fully functioning.
Mm-hmm.
But then, writers were also restless. And there was a writer younger than I, Arlene Babs. She became quite a figure when she was the very first who took up the offer of Hans Menzies to work for the biggest crony newspaper of all, the Bulletin. I was just watching her very amused. I was not about to take any of that seriously. One day, she called me to her home. She asked for a visit. I visited. She said, I just wanted to show you this. She had piles like this, about 2 or 3 piles this high of letters to her because of the column. People were hungry for the real thing, you know. It had been 8 years of this stupid man pretending to rule us all by killing everybody or imprisoning them. I said, Sylvia, look, this is serious. What do you think we should do? I said, oh, why we? You got into that. Stick to it. Please, can you help me? Can you join me? Please, please. I wouldn't listen. Then one night, a month or so later, I get an invitation from the publisher, quotes, the nominal publisher of the Bulletin, because Marcos by now owned most of the stock of this newspaper, to the opera. So I went. With General Hans Menzies and Arlene Babs, Hans Menzies made a case for my joining Arlene. I said, okay, I'll try it for 1 month. The moment I see anything wrong, I split, okay? General, he said, yes, of course. Okay, that's how I got in. And then soon enough, Hans Menzies expands the participation because now martial law was over. He adds 2 more women columnists. We were all women, take note, you know. So it was quite a pleasure at the time. But then what happened there was we 4 women attracted, magnetized more of the ones who were really totally fed up and going to do something concrete about it. So like we were some kind of fulcrum. Well, it didn't last long because realpolitik, you know. Ronald Reagan was coming for a visit that June. Just the summer months before, we 4 women columnists all traveled to different parts of the world. I was in Russia. I believe Arlene was in America. No, Melinda Quintas de Jesus was in America. Nines Oliva, I don't remember. We were all traveling the world on coverage. When we got home, we were all notified that we had been terminated. And that was what started the whole Free the Artist, Free the Media brouhaha.
You want to describe what came next in greater detail?
Well, they were calling for a mass boycott of all the crony press, the left. They were just dying for that chance. So that's what happened. And then when they killed Ninoy, the day after the rally was called, well, all hell broke loose, right? What absolute fun. That's how Free the Artist, Free the Media was, I think, the first wave that just went on and on and on and traveled the world soon after, right?
Let's talk about a little bit more about the relationship between the left and the young intelligentsia that you represent, or the what would you say, it's not really bohemia, it's counterculture, it's a bit of it's not the left per se, it's independent of the left, the scene that you're a part of, the commune that you're living in. How does the left try to intersect that, or where does it meet up? You have Emmanuel Acaba, I think.
Yes, the brothers Lacaba. Pete and Eman. Yes. So you're getting it. It's really personality-based. Our relationship's personality-based. But to our delight, it has not worked against us. It has worked for us. Because it's so easy to discuss differences and then just come to some kind of a working synthesis, enough to meet all the other energies that flow our way. And this is history we're riding. We're all conscious of that. It's actually a very intelligentsia. Very nice to grow old in it. You know, when I see Steinem being interviewed, I feel I identify so closely because this is how it really worked. This is how it changed things. Personal relationships. And then you sit back and look at it theoretically and then connect it to all the other historical movements that have brought these things about. We were just so thrilled to learn that Alexandra Kollontai had been the lover of Lenin because it was like us, exactly like us.
There's a revolution brewing.
Yeah. And there's sex all over the place, if you want it. If you don't, oh, you go yoga. You know, that's fine too. See, that's liberation.
How do artists like Broca and Leon deal with this?
So you have to talk past tense now, no?
Yeah, yeah. How did they? Yeah.
They were always fun to watch together because you could just see the word dialectics written large behind their backs. Two different temperaments, two different personalities, but they absolutely agreed what the goal was. Ha ha ha! And they were both gonna say it in film. What fun! That's the kind of fun that the Russian guys must have had in the beginning until people started to power trip. That was the problem there.
But early on, there was a lot of thinking from one piece to another
Yes.
between the artists.
Yes. It's dialectic. It's almost like chemistry or physics. I believe governed by the same rules.
But then maybe there's a shift to the left, and I'm thinking of the Makaisa 1984
Makaisa.
1 symposium, which you participated
Yes.
in. Lacaba, Lino.
Yeah, we were all there.
I think Mike De Leon's not there. He's
No,
not.
no, no, Mike, never. Mike doesn't join. He wants to lead. Okay. Shh, he's gonna kill me.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there? Who organizes it?
My cousin, Doreen Fernandez, my first cousin. I didn't realize she was in so deep with the left. She's a Nasandera, for God's sake. She grew up in Negros. I had no idea. She was sheltering them. Her home, her beautiful home designed by her interior designer of a husband whom they called a genius, Willie Fernandez. She would shelter them there. It was a safe house, good God. And they found out after she died. Then was season sends public condolences. Oh my God, what's going on? You know, history never stops surprising you. So my cousin, she organizes this and she makes sure that it runs properly. I was saying to myself, why do you sound like a communist, Doreen? You know, in my head. You know, I was beginning to suspect. Why are you so at home with these commies? I'm the commie, not you. My elder cousin whom I really truly loved. Yeah.
And you didn't realize that she was.
No, how deep she was.
Oh.
That's how deep she was. She's wonderful. My mother was so shocked. Mom, Doreen is the bigger communist than me. Stop scolding me.
So she's the moving force behind the symposia.
No, she would be in partnership with Nicanor Chongson.
What role
Who's
does
doing, yeah.
What role does Nicanor Chongson play?
Let's see. I'm thinking of a lot of naughty things. We used to call him Nicanora. Because you know how it is with Filipinos. They say you're gay even if you're not. So he was Nicanora. And the president of the Cultural Center of the Philippines was pretty much, Bing Rojas was pretty much putty in his hands. So we called her Matet for the daughter of Nora Honor. You know, those horrible people in Cultural Center, they're very funny. So while all this was happening, they were staffing this whole thing. And like PETA, it was really half theater piece and half social movement, you see. I mean, that's my perspective of it, you know. A lot of this is theater. Filipinos love theater. They do theater. They are theater. If you want to understand their politics, remember that.
You make a case for doing committed journalism.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that would mean and why you felt that way at that point?
Because it was obvious that everything is connected, right? You don't do journalism. You don't end 20 years of silence because of crony press without a framework for your decision and where you think it should go. I'm speaking for myself. But then if you listen, fine. Look where it's gotten us now, you know, that kind of thing. It's a daily work in exchanging perceptions, arriving at your personal synthesis, giving it back. It's a constant dynamic. That's what makes it so alive, so vibrant. And look where it's taken us. Right now, I think we're at rest at this point, apparently at rest. The energies are settling down, trying to find the center again. That's what's happening now in the Philippines with Duterte. Remember how noisy the protests were actually the moment he ran. And then, you know, it's gained volume. intensity, especially with the commies with the U.S. Marcos slogans. They had the warm bodies, they're the warm bodies. But then people withdrew and began to see that they were being criticized by some of the more intelligent critics with some experience. And so now I think people are sitting back again, wondering what's the next step. Me, I already know, but I'm not telling. I have my sources.
So throughout the 70s, you're kind of watching the
Yeah.
national democracy from a distance
Yes.
and the Marxist, so-called Marxist framework,
Yeah.
which I guess in a way becomes a little bit, it becomes hegemonic, I think you might say,
Yes.
at that time,
Yes.
in 83,
Yes.
84, when the symposia
Yes,
is
you
happening.
get it, yeah.
Why did you feel that it was a more viable framework at that point?
Because I could see the creatives entering the scene. The others, I kind of looked at as robots, good-hearted robots. I didn't want any part of that. This formulaic understanding of Philippine history without full study, without full research. I was very busy, the culture side, studying the anthropology of it, the archaeology of it, the linguistics of it. I was after the roots. They were after the ibagsak, ibagsak, ibagsak. I mean to say, wow, this isn't going anywhere. True enough, many of them proved to be little dictators, especially when they began to, they did their own killings of new NPA, torture, murder, execution of new NPA, just because somebody planted the idea that these were deep penetration agents planted by the military. It happened there in Manahaw. It happened there. It happened there in Cagayan, in Zamboanga. It happened there where the NPA were teeming. Young people looking for something, some meaning to all this. Years of vacuum under Mark. So, hello, it's called human nature.
How about the unorganizable artists, Mike De Leon, but also Lino Broca? If you look at
Yeah.
what he says
You
at the
got it.
conference, it's not ideological,
Yeah.
actually.
No way. It always comes from the puso. It's Lino. It's always the heart. That's why I loved him. The heart is never wrong. No, really. When Lino has said that, okay, let's just listen to the feedback from the left, and then we just do synthesis. Okay, Pete. That's what We were. It was really a matter of chemistry most of the time. From my perspective, I'm not the usual. You may have noticed.
And Pete was more of the mediator, if you will. Pete Lacaba.
No. I believe Pete had a wider perspective. But Lino was very precious because he brought the energy. He was a catalyst. He's the catalyst. That's just the way he's made. Mike would withdraw and then seem to be snobbing everything and everyone. And then the moment he comes back, through Pete, he always has an intermediary. You know how he is. A little rich boy. Intermediary to keep his dignity. He agrees with everybody, and then he has all the readings to back it up. When he threw Bertolt Brecht at us, when we were all very confused, as to what to do with our documentary. Because Mike was just shooting and shooting everything on the streets, Parliament on the street, just shooting everything. Now, how do we make a film? Okay, we throw ideas around. And he just absorbs all the ideas. And then the very next day, he throws us the script. Bertolt Brecht in Tagalog. Fantastic. Everything fits so well. The artist, only the quiet artist. Lino started the fire, okay? Pete kind of just made it grow larger. Mike withdrew and turned it into a film. That's what happened there.
Can you say a bit more about what was your role in Signos?
Sounding board, as well as basically I was organizing them too. I was making the appointments with people and then having his assistants follow it up. Basically, his assistants were communists. That too was funny. The making of Signos is more interesting than Signos itself. Because he was fending them off at the same time he was sending them scurrying. Fantastic.
It was Aquino was one of the, I think that's who you mentioned.
Edna.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she'll kill me. But it's okay now. She's doing yoga. I told you so. You can't survive Mike without yoga.
There's a mixture of people that are interviewed in this film. There's like Sister Tan, who I don't think is really a leftist.
She's left us already. No, she was not.
She's not a communist. Yeah.
No, she was a Catholic nun, a very deep one.
Mm.
Liberation theology nun. She lived her words. Thing was, she was always in quotes the wrong company. I mean to say, she's always with them.
And Felicing
Yes,
Villalobos.
Villados.
He's a founder of KMU, but maybe not the hard left, if you will.
That I don't know.
Mm.
You have to look deeper
Yeah.
into that on your own. That I don't know.
But there's a very dynamic mix who's putting this
Yes.
piece together.
Exactly.
Mm.
That's what happened. We were all in a dynamic experience.
How about Burgos, who's interviewed for the film?
Oh, he was just true blue. He was wonderful. He like Lino. He was functioning on instinct. But it was the hard-headed kind of instinct that would ram through anything that for something he truly believed in. He was beautiful. Joe Burke was really beautiful.
Can you talk a little bit about how you started working for Malaya?
Well, very simply, right after that huge get together at the Heritage Gallery to launch the boycott of the controlled press, the crony press, right after that, Joe Burgos approached me and said, "Oh, you write a column for us na sa Malaya, huh? You get into the same kind of trouble we got in the forum." I said, "Yeah, let's go." That's it.
How about the media boycott that you mentioned? Can you describe what that is and where it goes?
Well, yeah, past tense, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that they were just not going to buy those newspapers. And that what we were going to encourage advertisers to drop their advertising. It's like this, no? When a good idea comes from a collective, it may not happen right away, but it will happen sooner or later. Somebody will pick it up. Cory Aquino picked it up after the snap election when Marcos cheated her of the vote. Cory Aquino picked it up, and that's when it really worked. The advertisers dropped their contracts or whatever. They pulled out. It was economic muscle that Cory had the power to harness. That's why I have very, very deep respect for everybody's individual part, all the different cogs in this huge EDSA protest machine, including Cardinal Sin, including Fidel Ramos, including Enrile. Everybody played a role and it just happened. That's why I think the left is mistaken in being too deliberate. It loses its power and magic. Filipinos react very well to magic.
How about Sister Stella and Bayan Ko Kapit sa Patalim?
Ba-
Bayan Ko Kapit sa Patalim, that's Broca's film, and Sister Stella L
Oh.
is Mike De Leon's film.
Yeah.
Were you in the middle of either one of those films or watching from?
Sister Stella.
Mm.
I organized the rally for Mike. We had a high old time. Yeah, because we were also doing signals at the same time.
Mm.
Pete and Mike and Lino were busy with Kapit sa Patalim. That was their thing.
So you weren't really in the middle of that one.
No. Maybe I visited. We were very sociable in those days. Just go to everybody's happening just to see what was happening. I was always interested as a columnist. But for Mike, I was really doing this with all my heart. Because I was there from the beginning when I saw how he was blossoming. When I met him at the preview of Batch 81, I was impressed and repelled at the same time. But we had a very interesting exchange after that. After which he said, "Let's keep in touch." And I knew that meant something. We had sparked each other's interest on our frequencies because I understood what he was trying to do. Although I thought he went a bit extreme, but that's me. So from there, we were friends. Yeah, it's rare that you become friends with Mike De Leon. So when the rallies began, he was right there. He was shooting film himself in our first Free the Artist, Free the Media. And then he was a regular presence in all the other rallies with his driver and his assistant, but holding the camera himself, that kind of thing. You see, you relate to each other where you are. And somehow, when the gods are good, it works. It really does work like a dream.
How did Sister Stella happen? And what was its relation to Cygnus?
Mike wanted Pete to write a script because he was very attracted to the idea of the nuns. I think part of him that was attracted was the whole idea of Catholic learning radical, because I guess it was kind of an autobiographical resonance here. I mean, his world was being shaken, so that's why he chose the nun. He was very struck by Sister Christine and our interview. He was very, very struck by that.
Can you describe your experience at EDSA?
Yeah, that was beautiful 2-hour walk up and down. Basically, I was feeling that the martyrs of the Philippine Revolution were there. Their spirits were walking beside us. That's how I felt. And then before I knew it, the priests of the Communications Foundation for Asia wanted me to write a script for this whole event. And I said, but the Holy Spirit is writing the script. They said, okay, listen to the Holy Spirit. We trust you. So that's what happened. We did a beautiful documentary, People Power, the EDSA Experience, funded by basically a church organization. The church was very, very much in our revolution. Although some people said it wasn't a revolution. I don't care what they call it. It was levitation producing. It was just wonderful. They gave me two cameramen. We were in and out of Krame, in and out of Enrile and Ramos' office, in and out. And when the whole thing climaxed and finally ended, there was tons and tons of independent videos that poured into the office. My God, the editing was so difficult. But I think we produced something really beautiful. Communications Foundation for Asia. My God, it was something. A man who would be shot. Rolando Olalia, the labor leader, pounding on the door, wanting an audience with Enrile and Ramos. While they were busy setting up an altar to say Mass, those two, having Mass said in their office. You know, everybody was breaking stereotypes. Rolando Olalia, labor leader, knocking. He wanted to talk. He wanted to offer something. They wouldn't let him in. I was begging. I was inside, please. No, you know. A few days later, they shot him. I mean, the forces of good and evil were all present. It was quite a dance. Dance macabre, at the same time that it was a mystical experience. I mean, that was EDSA. The communists kneeling for Mass on the street, fabulous. Everybody sending food from everywhere, amazing. Too many sandwiches, stop. And there were just cameramen to direct what's happening. You know, out of this world.
Yeah, that's one hell of a movie.
Out of this world. Really out of this world. No wonder the world got turned on. Berlin was equally exciting. I was there too, by accident.
It was similar experience?
Yeah, pretty much. This is why I felt that the 80s, at least in my personal life, were magical because we were seeing things changing before our very eyes. All through the 80s, all through, you know, Myanmar, Tiananmen, Berlin, and of course, poor old Soviet Union. Gorbachev had just enough time to walk through the global stage to change things.
We just talked with the editor, Boy Vinarao, and he said, you will never get another FPJ today. You won't get another Lino Broca today. Would you agree? And if so, why?
Add many more. We will never get another Cardinal Sid. We will never get another Cory. They were unique. They were evolved for that moment. Yeah, I would agree. Why would I agree? Because this country belongs to Juan de la Cruz. Juan de la Cruz was the mystic brother of Saint Teresa of Avila. They are very much present, you know, in our hearts. This is a mystical country, Daniel. That's what we are. This is why we are unpredictable. Even to ourselves. Really. That's why, you know, these political analysts, they're only pretending they know what's happening. Everyone's guessing. Somebody wrote a column today in the Business Mirror, Tito Valiente, and he called it, the wisdom of what no? The country of whatever wisdom. Whatever. We have a tendency to dismiss everything, all organized thought, with whatever. Food for thought. We're a whatever people. We're always waiting for, I don't know, heavenly signs. We may not admit it because we're pretending to be intellectual, but I think it's a fact. And based on our guesswork, the world was turned on. We will never forget that. Now we're trying to find the formula because we lost it. It's so funny. This country is so funny.
I think it was Joey Clemente, cameraman for Asia Visions, that said to me, you know, Marcos was what allowed us to come together and organize ourselves, and when Marcos was gone, that precipitated the disintegration of...
True. Yeah, it's true. It happened to most of us. We preferred to relax. You see, Daniel, Filipinos are really torn between having a good, functioning, diligent, disciplined country and entertaining each other. You see, this is our weakness. We love to entertain each other. So we forget, you know, the main goal, the main point. Only when we're roused by some kind of thunder and lightning, you know. Like Digong Duterte began, you know. We polarized, you know. two opposing camps who wouldn't speak to each other. And then the businessmen figured out that there were more people to manipulate than there were to convince. So that's why they come up with their fake news thingy. And they were right on the global stream because that was happening too, in America and all over the world, it seems. So I don't know how these things actually work. It takes the academics a decade or so to figure it all out, right? What happened then?
To catch
They
up.
ask questions like you. But it's happening right now. What I'm trying to figure out is how that 86 connects to this now.
Very interesting. Do you have any closing thoughts we've been talking about?
I always end with God bless you. Just like Cardinal Sin. God bless you. God bless us all. That's my closing thought. Also opening thought.